All right, so
Okay.
excuse me, I don't present very often, so usually it's, I don't know if any of you have heard of the Senior Moment podcast. It was a radio show. Lockwood had us doing that for several years, and so that's usually my forum is getting on the radio and talking behind a mic. But I'm glad you all came out. Thank you very much for that. I heard, I think it was Ann, were you mentioning the book club last night?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to put you to the test here. Can you tell me the famous line from A Tale of Two Cities?
I cannot.
All right, go for it,
It
John.
was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
There we go. That's honestly, that's kind of like what the that's what being a senior in America is like right now. I'll get into that in a little bit and why I feel that way. But I'm going to start off with a little bit. This may be kind of a refresher. In senior care, there are, once you move out of your home, there are essentially 3 levels of care. You have independent living communities, and independent living communities are exactly what they sound. They are a group of seniors that are all living together. They really don't need much help at all. Typically, most of the residents that live there still have their license and are driving daily. My grandparents lived in one over in Charlotte. They would go down to the tennis club every day. Really, it's all about safety for that and meal prep. They usually will have a large dining room, restaurant style. Grandpa loved it. They had cocktails before. So I mean, honestly, it's a really nice place to live. The next step from independent living is where I am in the spectrum, and that's assisted living. So when you need assisted living, that's typically when you need a little bit more help. Maybe you need, we of course offer the dining, but then we also have team members that will come and help you in taking your medications. They'll be there to help with showers. They'll do light housekeeping, and then we have housekeepers come in once to twice a week, and as needed if there's any accidents. And then finally, there is skilled nursing rehab. So that would be similar to Crystal Bluffs. They're probably the most known community in our area for that. And usually that is when you need 24/7 nursing care. There's 2 versions of skilled nursing. One is when you're going for quick rehab, and that's typically covered by your Medicare benefits. It's less than 100 days. Or it may be that you're living there permanently. And like I said, that's when you need to have a nurse that can help take care of you 24/7. So that's the main difference between assisted living and nursing care, is that somebody who's in a nursing home needs to have 24-hour actual nurses. Carteret Landing itself, so I'm gonna give my place a little bit of a plug. Carteret Landing itself, we've been open for a little over 8.5 years now. Before we came to town, Brookdale was the only other option. They're over by Sanborn Orthodontics. And so we're owned by Ridge Care, which is a small family corporation. We have 2 owners that are out of Kernersville, North Carolina. They were nursing home administrators before going into assisted livings. And we actually, as of today, we were at 7 buildings. Today they just purchased an 8th building up in the mountains. So that's hot off the press. But our assisted living, Carteret Landing, has a total of 110 licensed beds. Of that, 24 are memory care. So we have assisted living and then a locked unit for those residents that have Alzheimer's or dementia and need the safety of being able to stay behind locked doors. We have semi-annual surveys. They're supposed to be annually, but the better you do, the less frequently they visit you. So our last one, we were deficiency-free. So that means that they really don't come very often. Now, we do have a county monitor that comes 4 times a year at a minimum to visit us, and her name's Abigail. We work really well with her. So that is Carteret Landing in a nutshell. We have, the last thing is we've got 65 different apartments or different rooms, and like I said, that's a total of 110 licensed beds. Most of the residents in assisted living are renting their rooms as private rooms, which means that you are you're paying a little bit more, but you don't have to have a roommate. And that seems to be the model that most assisted livings are going to, getting rid of the shared rooms and then having private rooms. Do you have any questions that I can answer about the differences between the levels of care before I move on? Like I said, I was trying to do a quick review of that. Everything else that I focus on today will be on assisted living.
Who makes the decision if somebody is in, let's say they're in independent, moving to assisted?
Certainly.
Is that the facility says, wait, it's dangerous, or is it
It's usually,
individual? And
yeah.
same for assisted to skilled care?
It's usually a combination of factors. For us at the assisted living level, we're working closely with the family members as well as their doctor, their primary care physician, to help in making that decision. It's the same typically at independent living, where usually it'll be the family and the doctor that are the primary drivers, but the community itself is going to be keeping communication with the family to say, this is really getting beyond our care. It's probably time to move to a higher level of care. Our goal is that we can try to take care of people until they pass away. And in most instances, probably 90% of the time, our residents are able to, they feel like Carteret Landing is their home. And we have many residents that may, if they go to the hospital, they say, if they know they're going to pass away, they say, I want to come home. And they mean Carteret Landing. So that is our goal, but our number one priority is making sure that everybody stays safe. And as an industry, that's pretty much everyone's goal, because people who go into this industry really care about seniors. They really care about they come to love them. So I actually just ran into last night a family member who had their loved one pass away recently, and they stopped and had me talk to them for half an hour over in Beaufort. But we all become family members together. So it's a combination of care. Everybody kind of gets involved in making that decision.
What is the organization that visits annually and for you guys less?
So that's actually the state. So DHHS comes and visits. So. Any other questions that I can answer about the differences between? All right, let's go ahead and move on. And so as I said, this is kind of the best of times and the worst of times to be a senior in America. Americans are getting older. We're living longer than we've ever lived before, even with the COVID pandemic. We are an aging society. So some of the statistics based from the Census Bureau indicate that by 2030 there will be 73 million seniors that are over the age of 65. That means that 1 in 5 Americans are going to be over the age of 65. As we start talking about the people who may need the care of independent livings, assisted livings, and nursing homes, through 2050, the 80-plus population is going to have an explosion, a historical explosion of numbers of people that reach that age. And then most of our residents, in all honesty, are in that 80 to 85 range when they're moving into our community. And so in 2025, it's approximately 7.4 million people who are the age of 85 or older. By 2030, it's going to actually be 19 million is the approximate number of people that are going to be 85 or older. And that's going to have a lot of large impacts moving forward. Again, this is all information from the Census Bureau. So the greatest number, or the greatest increase of people turning 85 plus will actually occur in 2027. So, but there will actually not be a decrease in the number of people turning 85 or older until after 2050. So this is going to become, like I said, this is a great thing because it means Americans are healthier, our healthcare is better, we're getting to live a much longer and healthier life. But there are going to be some impacts to that. One of those is on healthcare and the need for healthcare practitioners. Right now, According to the Bureau of Health Workforce, in 2030, they're anticipating that there'll be a shortage of about 208,000 RNs. On top of that, they're anticipating another shortage of 302,000 LPNs. So when you think about, that's 500,000 nurses that the country is going to be short. That's going to be impactful to hospitals, to us at our, hit the mic, sorry. So it's going to be impactful to us at the senior living level, because we're going to have a hard time in being able to hire enough people to take care of our residents. The other aspect of it is that right now there are about 7,500 geriatricians in the country that are board certified. So that would be doctors that specialize in geriatric care. The estimate is that by 2030, we're going to need 30,000 of them. That's actually a field that is decreasing in number. So there are fewer doctors who are interested in becoming a geriatrician. What does that mean? It basically means that there are fewer people who are going to be able to specialize and be able to help people in getting older and aging gracefully. The goal of this group is not going to be accomplished because of the lack of MDs that are specializing in this field. Some of that is pay, some of that is interest, some of that is hours. I know, so at our community, we have an incredible nurse practitioner whose name is Kelsey. Kelsey gives us her cell phone number so that they have an on-call system, but Kelsey cares so much about the residents that she takes care of. She gives us her cell phone number so that when we need to, we can go ahead and reach out to her directly. That's not necessarily the lifestyle that nurse practitioners or doctors want to live. And so it isn't a 9-to-5 job for them, which is also part of one of the reasons that may not be interested in coming to the field. But that's going to be a challenge going forward for Americans as we get older, is the lack of people who are able to help in taking care.
Speak briefly, Ryan, to the ratio requirements by state law or federal law for nurses or nurse practitioners to the client pool that you have.
Certainly. So there isn't a requirement for the number of doctors or nurse practitioners, because when you move into an assisted living community, you get to choose, you get to keep your doctor, or if they have a preferred provider, you can continue to use your own doctor or the one that we use. But there are staffing ratios in regards to how many CNAs and med techs are required in assisted living. The state doesn't require us to have a nurse. Ridgecare believes that that is the best way that we can provide the best care for our residents. So we actually have a nurse on staff. Her name is Misty. She'd kill me if I said this, but I'm gonna claim she works banker's hours. But she's also on call 24/7 and many nights isn't going home until after 7 o'clock. So when you're looking at assisted livings, that would be one of the questions to ask is, do you have a nurse on staff? But when it comes to the actual ratios of med techs and CNAs, so during the day, we have, for every 8 residents, we have to have 1 CNA. And then as it gets later, so on second shift, it stays the same. So until 11 o'clock, basically, from 7 a.m. until 11 p.m., we have to have one per 8 residents. And then overnight, it actually goes up to 1 per 30 residents. Now, my company doesn't believe that those are enough people to help. So we are actually staffed much higher than that. Based upon what the state requires, I would be allowed to have just 1.5 people taking care of my residents at night. We usually have between 3 and 4 people taking care of the residents overnight. So, again, I'll admit, we are the most expensive community in this area, but there are some things that you're going to get what you pay for. And funding is something that I'm going to be talking about in a little bit, because it's also going to become a very concerning aspect of taking care of seniors in the future. Does that answer the question? This will also impact nursing homes. Nursing homes are actually required to have nurses, and so because they're required to have nurses, they are going to be much more impacted by the shortage that's going to occur over the next 5, 10, 15 years, unless something is figured out. So when you start talking about Crystal Bluffs, Pruitt has struggled since they moved to the new community in Beaufort. They've really struggled to be able to find enough people to work and to be able to take care of the residents. It's honestly it's a very difficult position to be in, and our goal, my goal, is to be fully staffed, meaning that we wouldn't have to have any overtime. We would need about 90 people working at my community. Right now I have about 74 that are working at my community. So what that means is that basically anybody who wants to work overtime on my staff is able to get as many hours as they want. As a company, we paid out over $100,000 last year to have bonuses and overtime to cover all of the shifts. Again, we didn't have to do that. We could have just gone down to state ratios, but that's not who Ridgecare is. That's not who I am, and that's not what our residents deserve. So it is going to continue to be a challenge, though, and it's going to be a challenge for all of the healthcare communities in this area to be able to attract enough people to take care of all of the residents that need that help. And as you can see from what I was talking about with what the census is reporting, it's only going to get worse. And so that's a huge challenge for us going into the future. Right, yeah.
How many med techs and so forth do you have during the daytime? You said the state required 1 per 8. And then English or company.
So right now we're running during the day, and I'm not going to include memory care. I'm just going to include the assisted living portion of our community. In our assisted living portion, we're typically having 3 med techs, and then we usually have 2 additional aides. So we're running 5 people. During the day, we would be able to get away. We would be able to technically have as few as 3 people taking care of the residents. So it's not nearly as many as, I don't believe that it's nearly as many as it's needed.
Okay.
So I don't believe the state is requiring what is truly needed to take care of the residents. I believe that we do a good job. So across the nation, assisted living communities are currently at about 90 to 92% occupied. So that means that on a regular basis, only 10% of the rooms that are across the country are available. That in itself is a challenge. So in this area, if you're looking to have somebody move into an assisted living, you really only have 4 main options. You have Carteret Landing and Brookdale, which I've mentioned both of us already. And then if you go down to Swansboro, you have the Landings of Swansboro and the Cottages of Swansboro. The Embassy just recently opened in May, so that's actually a fifth option that is available. And they're establishing their roots and their reputation. I think everybody does a good job. But occupancy in this area is extremely high. We currently have probably a 3 to 4 month wait list before somebody would be able to move into our community. That's normally what happens in independent living, is that you'll get on a wait list and you'll stay on the wait list for a year, and then you go ahead and you move in. It's really difficult when you need assisted living, because that typically means that you really do need help. You need that help immediately, and the idea of having to wait 3 to 4 months is pretty hard. So as occupancy rises across the nation, it's going to be even more difficult to be able to get into communities. And again, that number of people that need help is just continuing to grow. So yes.
So what do you recommend as an approach
Do you get your name on the waiting list as soon as you think you might
So,
need it? Or,
yeah.
and it just revolve?
So the way, for our company, the way our waiting list works is that somebody will put down a deposit, and then when a room becomes available, Lynn, who is our family counselor, will reach out and call that person and say, are you ready? And then if they say no, they don't lose that number 1 spot. We just move on to the number 2 person and number 3 person. We go down our list until somebody says, yes, we're ready to move in. Each company is going to be different. Each building is going to be different in how they manage their wait lists. But depending upon where you're looking to go and what the demand is, the earlier you get on the wait list, the better off you are, because when those rooms do become available, you're going to be right in line to be able to get it. And the other aspect of it is that when you start looking for places, you don't want to be in a situation where you go to the hospital and you are told you're not safe to go home. We're not going to release you until you have someplace safe to go. Because when you're in that situation, then, and you don't have any idea as to where you want to go, then you basically are just going whoever's got the first opening. My parents have already been looking up in Raleigh as to where they would want to move. So they're now 70. They're now 74. And so they're already looking and planning on where they would be moving to. So
That's too close, Ryan.
So they've been doing this for a little while for 2 reasons. They had this experience with my grandparents when my grandparents started looking for a place to go. My mom went to many of those meetings with them over in Charlotte and honestly, they were looking at independent living. My mom was ready to move in right then. I mean, some of the independent livings are absolutely incredible. They are nothing like what you would expect. It's like, I mean, some of them are like the Grove Park Inn. They are beautiful. They are high class. I mean, you can spend just a minimum amount of money, or you can go to places that it costs $1 million to get in the door. And so they started that process very early from my grandparents' experience. The other aspect of it is that my dad actually does have Alzheimer's as well. And so my mom has started the process because she knows that at some point she's not going to be able to take care of my dad at home anymore, and he's going to need some place to live. And she doesn't want him to be, like I said, they're up in Raleigh. She doesn't want him to be 3 hours away living with me and her unable to visit. So I do suggest the best thing to do is to start early. You don't have an independent living option in the Morehead City, Carteret County area. Your closest independent living is actually up in James City, called the Viridian. So if that's something that you think might be in your future, then that would be a place to go and visit. Ridge Care, our closest independent living, would be in Hampstead, so a little over an hour away as well. But there really isn't the option of an independent living. But you can start looking at assisted livings. I suggest going and looking at all 4 of the ones that I mentioned and just get an idea as to what they're like, kind of experience them, and nobody wants to live with us. I'll be the first to tell you, nobody wants to live at Carteret Landing. But typically, after a month, they realize that yes, they would still rather be home, but that this is a really good option, and they make a lot of friends. It becomes a good experience. Like I said, I recognize every day when I go to work that nobody truly wants to be living where I work, but we do our best to make sure that they enjoy it, that they're making friends, that they feel that they're still living a fulfilled life. So, does that answer the question?
It does, and you just triggered a thought. How do you judge whether they feel they're living a fulfilled life?
It's hard for us to judge. One of the ways that I know is that I had a resident that passed away, and his son wrote me a letter, and in the letter it said, I was so sad to move my dad into Carteret Landing. I thought that it was the end. And I'm paraphrasing, but after seeing him there for several months and seeing how happy he was, and he would tell me what he was doing every day, that I knew that it wasn't the end, that it really wasn't just a holding space until somebody passes away, but he was thriving there. And he said, and then I felt the same way when he moved into memory care. I felt like it was just a holding space until he passed away. But then seeing the activity program that you had in memory care, and that they really weren't just sitting in front of a TV all day or sitting in their room all day, that they were actively doing things, that he felt like his dad was still living a fulfilled life.
Mhm.
So that's really the only way that I can judge it. But I'll tell you, I get a lot of hugs when I come to work in the morning, and so I don't think people would be so excited and hugging me if they didn't at least feel some joy in what they were experiencing each day. So another thing that is challenging for our industry is that right now there is a complete and total lack of investment. So you all know I'm going to try to keep this as out of politics as possible, but we've had a lot of years that we had a lot of inflation. And then we've also had a lot of years where building costs have gone up. Those two things combined have resulted in for a long time it was impossible for companies to get loans from a bank. Between the number of companies that went bankrupt during COVID, the staffing shortages that happened after COVID, banks were not lending to assisted living and senior care companies. So my CEO actually just got back from a National Investment Center conference, and I've got some of the statistics that he was able to give to me to be able to share with y'all. So in 2026, when you look nationwide, there was actually a shortage of 40,000 new units in comparison to what was the new units that were needed. That's bad in itself, but as it continues, as our population continues to grow, it actually gets a lot worse. By 2030, there's almost 400,000 new units needed that won't be built. And that means
Is that
what?
nationwide or?
That's nationwide, yep. So that's nationwide.
Okay.
So in 2030, based upon the current building and therefore trend of building, they're anticipating that there'll be 209,000 new units that will be built. The anticipated need by 2030 is that we'll need another 605,000. So there is going to be a very, very large discrepancy between how many people need our help and how much help we can actually give. The dollar amounts are pretty staggering in my opinion. On average, it costs about $500,000 per unit when you build a new community. They're averaging that over the time. They're anticipating that by 2030 we'll need about $400 billion worth of investment in the industry in order to actually meet the demands that are anticipated. The planning right now is based upon what companies are reporting that about $123 billion is going to be spent. Yes?
When you say there'll be a deficit of 400,000 units,
Mm-hmm.
is a unit a facility or a room?
A room.
Okay.
So there'll be about 409,000 people that need to live in an assisted living that even if they could afford it, they're not going to be able to move in just because there won't be one.
Was the reason that they couldn't get bank loans the fact that because of the building cost, they didn't feel like a facility would be able to charge enough to the residents to pay the loan back?
I'm not exactly sure, but what I can say is based upon their experience of the number of buildings or companies that were going bankrupt during that time period, they lost a lot of investment on that. The banks did,
Okay.
and so they weren't willing to loan because they did not feel like it was a good source of income at the time.
Too risky.
Exactly.
And has that turned around any?
It is starting to, yes. So.
You're saying that there were a number of companies that went bankrupt. Was that as a result of COVID and the extensive, care that requirements that were imposed on them?
It's part of it, yes. There were a couple things that combined together. A lot of places had a significant number of deaths, and people were not interested in moving in. So you had a lot of increased costs, and then you had a major decrease in the number of people that wanted to live in communal living, and people just couldn't pay the bills. On top of that, as you mentioned, there were a lot of requirements and a lot of PPE that we don't normally have to use, but we were having to use and on a daily basis. Even right now, there are still a lot of requirements from COVID, and COVID is back. Where as soon as you have 2 people who have COVID, your community is considered an outbreak status. So we're in an outbreak right now at our community, and that means that our team members are on a regular basis using additional surgical masks. Anytime we're working with a resident that has COVID, we're wearing N95 masks, which are even more expensive, plus face shields, plus gowns. So there was a lot of additional costs just in that sense. And then on top of that, we had to attract people that still wanted to work. And especially at the beginning of it, when there wasn't much known about COVID and the dangers of COVID, it was really hard to get people to work. So we were paying hazard pay, we were paying double rates, increased bonuses, extra vacation time. So all of those are my personal experience of what we did to try to attract additional people. And when you combine that across the entire country, and then hospitals, and we were all competing for the same caregivers. Nurses were doing travel nursing and making $250,000, $300,000 a year by going to hotbeds of COVID, and so there were a lot of companies that just couldn't pay those kind of bills. They were leveraged. The silver wave is what they call the senior that are coming, and that had been anticipated. That's been anticipated for a very long time. So there were a lot of companies that were over leveraged in trying to build out to be prepared for when this demand comes, but they then weren't able to pay for what they've done when the pandemic hit. So it was a combination of a lot of factors that resulted in the banks not being willing to lend. The banks are starting to open up again and be interested in lending to companies, responsible companies. Like I mentioned, we just purchased a new community, and so that's a signal that yes, it's starting to open up. But again, even with all of that, they're anticipating that we're going to be so far underdeveloped.
Too little, too late.
Too little, too late, exactly. So by 2035, the anticipated need that will have a shortfall is $526 billion. And then by 2040, they anticipate that there would need to be about $1 trillion worth of investment between now and 2040 to meet the needs of what's coming. And the anticipation, or what they anticipate will be spent is about $250 billion.
You mentioned banks and their reluctance to invest.
Mm-hmm.
What about private equity funds?
That is not something that I'm really involved in. I believe that private equity is going to see, the writing is on the wall as to what's needed.
Yeah.
Right.
So there is all sorts of opportunities there. but I don't know how fast they're moving on it, and what the options are. But what this means is that when you combine a shortage of caretakers and you combine that with a shortage of places to live, prices are going to go up, and prices will go up significantly. So right now, Carteret Landing, if you're living in our assisted living and you want to live in a private room, you're looking at around $7,000 to $7,500 a month. If you need memory care and you want a private room in memory care, you're looking at over $10,000 a month. So it already is extremely expensive. And that's with the industry itself being at 90%, still having 10% of the beds in the country available. When we are talking about not being able to help 400,000 people, there is that supply and demand is just going to be very out of whack. And unless they do build quickly, it's going to result in some really high price hikes. So that's why I'm saying it is great to be a senior right now, because we're healthier than we've ever been, living longer than we've ever lived, but it's also going to cost a lot more than what it has historically. And our family units have changed quite a bit. It used to be that, a lot of times there was one person who was able to stay at home while the other was out making the money. And that allowed for mom or dad to come and live with them. It requires, for a really good, unless you have a really high-paying job, it requires 2 people to raise a family now. So it's not really that possible to have somebody stay at home and take care of a loved one. So one of the other things is that will be a really big impact, and again, I'm going to try to stay out of the politics of this, but Medicaid plays a large role, less in assisted living. I know Brookdale doesn't accept Medicaid at all. For Carteret Landing, you need to live with us for at least 3 years before we would allow you to switch over to Medicaid or a Medicaid rate. I forget about the cottage. I'm not sure about the cottages or the landings if they accept Medicaid. But Medicaid plays a role in especially nursing homes and then also some assisted livings. So from the federal standpoint, there are going to be some Medicaid cuts coming over the next couple of years. They anticipate that it'll be about $1 trillion worth of Medicaid cuts. What does that mean for seniors? Most of those cuts really shouldn't impact seniors, so that part's good. The only area of concern is that states are going to be allowed to make it a little bit more difficult, more paperwork to be able to enroll in Medicaid. And so that can make it harder. I don't know how many people have gone through trying to apply for VA benefits, but if you've tried to go through get VA benefits, you have gone through the experience of what it may become like to apply for Medicaid. So that we won't have a judge on that for a couple of years. Those cuts don't really start to impact until after the next elections. So, but at the state level, this is something that is much more impactful on an immediate basis. On the state level, North Carolina, the Medicaid program requested $819 million to be able to fund Medicaid. Our government has approved $600 million. So what that means is that they've already announced that starting in October, there'll be a 10% reimbursement reduction at for nursing homes. Now, Medicaid, many of you may have Medicare, and Medicare covers if you go in for rehab. Oops, sorry, thank you. I'm wandering. So Medicare will cover your first 20 days, and after that, then it covers I believe that it's 80% of your stay, but you have a 20% copay. For many people, they have supplemental insurance that will cover that second 20%. But many seniors rely on Medicaid to be able to pay for their stay at, even at some places nice as Crystal Bluffs. Crystal Bluffs is still receiving Medicaid reimbursement. And so a 10% cut in that reimbursement is going to be very impactful in what they can finance. I was a nursing home administrator. I ran a nursing home in Maine for 3 years. Medicaid in Maine was called MaineCare. This was about 15 years ago. I hear that Medicaid reimbursement got better, but when I was running my nursing home, we lost $7 a day on every Medicaid resident. And so the only reason that my nursing home was able to survive was twofold. One was we made that up on residents that were coming in with under Medicare. So when they came in, and we were able to charge a higher rate for their skilled rehab. And then the other component of it was we were part of a large corporation, and our corporation strategy was that we had one building that was basically straight rehab Medicare. We had one building that was all dementia care, and then we had my building, which was based primarily Medicaid and long-term care. So they were planning on surviving by having sister facilities around us that were making money, while my community was the loss leader. But with a 10% reduction in Medicare or Medicaid rates and reimbursement, that may have a significant impact in nursing homes' ability to continue to operate. There are a lot that are already on the verge of not being able to stay open. This could have a significant impact. So from the legislative standpoint, I agree that there's got to be fraud that can be cut. But reducing the reimbursement of nursing homes is going to have a significant impact on senior care across the state. So that is just something that if you reach out to our state level representatives, take that into consideration as something to talk about. Like I said, I have no doubt that there's room to cut stuff, but senior care is really important. I don't know that that's the right place to do it. The other legislative component to take into consideration, and this is at the national level. When John and I first started to talk about this was actually what spurred this presentation. There's the Older Americans Act of 1965, and when we started talking about this, there were no sponsors to get that act renewed. At this point, it actually is being reauthorized, or they're working on reauthorizing it. But some of the things that this act supplies or helps to fund across the nation are Meals on Wheels. So that's a program for homebound seniors that if you're not able to get out and go to the grocery store, they'll help in delivering food to your home. So it's a really good program. Our senior center helps in funding that here and setting it up. But that would be, if this act was not reauthorized, that would be something that would face significant cuts. They also have the Ombudsman program. So the Ombudsman, that's a group of volunteers, although they're at the county level, there are some paid people that organize it. And then they organize volunteers to come into the communities and meet with the residents and just find out how things are going. And if the residents tell them of concerns, they bring the concerns to the administrator so that we can try to address those concerns. If there are legal concerns, if they're worried about a loved one is trying to take money from that person, they would come to me and we'd be working together to bring in DHS and try to get guardianship so that person's protected. But the Ombudsman program is also funded through the Older Americans Act. And then the Ombudsman program actually is worked through what's called Area Agencies on Aging. And I think January Brown has come and presented to you all before.
Yes.
So that group is who she works for. So the Older Americans Act is how her group is funded, and they do, as she probably expressed, they do so many things to help our seniors. And then one of the other things they do through that program is they help low-income seniors find jobs that are still something that they can do. So right now, Bernie Sanders and Bill Cassidy are the two co-sponsors to get it reauthorized. But it is really important. So please, reach out to Tom Tillis, reach out to Greg Murphy, let them know that if you support it, and hopefully you do, it is an important act to reauthorize so that we can continue to take care of our seniors. So some of the things that I see happening in the future, America's a great country, so we thrive on innovation. I think that we'll see the private equity coming in and helping. Banks will open up in lending. I think we're going to see a lot of building in our future for being able to take care of all the seniors that are going to need that help. I also personally believe that there's going to be a lot of innovation. So you see companies like Tesla that are developing robots. Ridge Tech Robotics, a bunch of different places are creating humanoid robots that I see as part of the future of senior care. It's going to be, I think that people willing to accept that is going to be a difficult transition. I taught Lynn, again, I mentioned her, she's our family advisor. She said, no way is a robot ever taking care of me. And so, but I do believe that is part of what's going to help in covering the shortage of staffing that's going to happen in the future. I was recently reading about over in China, those robots, one company has them for as little as $6,000 US. So if you have somebody that's able to, a robot that's able to come in and do your housekeeping, help in the cleaning, you may not need to go to a community as early as you might have otherwise. So there may be a delay in how long people are staying home before they need to move. I've seen on YouTube where the PlayStation uses sports athletes, star athletes, and they hook them up with all of these dots to be able to create their video games. Another company has done the same thing with famous chefs, and there are actually robots that will mimic exactly how the chefs are doing how they cook in the kitchen.
Wow.
And through scanners, they're taking they're taking things from the refrigerator, putting it on you have to put it on the buffet, and then the robot arms come and they do all the cooking. So I see a lot of hope in innovation in the future. The other aspect that I mentioned was in the shortage of nursing and doctors. Another thing that China did was they just did an experimental doctor's clinic. And I believe, if I remember correctly, they had 7 AI doctors and 3 AI nurses. And in a period of 3 days, they weren't doing surgeries and things, but they were doing the initial diagnostics and a normal checkup. In a period of 3 days, they treated 10,000 patients. And they said that the equivalent number of human doctors, it would have taken human doctors 2 years to treat that number of patients. Wow. So I think that whether we like it or not, there's going to be a whole revolution in technology that is going to truly impact how people are taken care of. Everyone from from pediatrics all the way through geriatrics will see a major shift in how we're all taken care of. So that's the information that I had for you today. I glazed over a bunch of topics. Are there questions that I can answer? Like I said, I have worked in nursing homes. My specialty is assisted living, but yes.
The CMS recently came out with their new rankings of facilities. What was the ranking for your facility?
We have not received a new ranking. I believe that we're still a 4-star facility, and so that's 4 out of 4 stars.
I thought it was 4 out of 5.
Not in assisted living.
Okay, thank you. How many geriatricians are in Carteret
I do not know the answer to that, actually.
Okay.
Not enough.
Not
Yeah,
enough.
not enough. I don't know the answer to that. Dr. Ivanoff is our primary care physician, so she technically oversees Kelsey, and I don't believe that she's a geriatrician. She was working at the hospital. She's a spectacular doctor, but I do not know if there's even a single geriatrician in Carteret County.
What is the average age of residents in assisted living and then in memory care? Is there-
So the ages are about the same, and we're right around, our average age right now is right around 87, 88 years old.
Wow.
So,
And finally, hospice.
mhm.
When hospice comes in for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia,
Mhm.
how does that change your reimbursement and care and so forth?
So at the assisted living level, hospice doesn't change any of the reimbursement for us. It really is more of an impact for the family because all of the supplemental things that a resident needs are typically going to be covered by hospice. So most of the medications, if a person needs Depends, those are normally covered by hospice services, which is under your Medicare benefits.
Yeah.
For assisted living itself, we still charge the resident our monthly rent.
Sure.
And that's how we're paid. We don't receive any reimbursement directly from hospice or from Medicare.
Okay.
Yes.
Given the area we live in, what happens if there's a major hurricane that is coming? How, both for the memory care that are normally in a locked environment, how do you evacuate people?
Each company has their own plans in place. For us, what we do, so if it's a category 2 or less, we're definitely staying in place. Our building has we've got a new roof, and we've got hurricane grade windows. It's a brick building, and we're built well above the flood level, so we didn't receive any flooding during Florence. Category 2 or less, we're definitely staying in place. Once it gets up to a 3, then that's when our company is honestly, they're talking with emergency management. I mean, we're talking with emergency management for any storm, but once you get up to a category 3, we're talking with emergency management, and our owners are basically making the decisions as to when we evacuate with emergency management's help. What we did for Florence and what our current plan would be is that we have coach buses. We have a contract with a coach bus company that's out of Kernersville, since that's where our home office is. And we rent coach buses to evacuate the residents. We have a contract with a hotel outside of Kernersville called the Village Inn. And so our residents will, basically it'll be 2 residents to a room. Before we had more communities, after COVID, and during the hiring struggles, our owners ended up selling off about 10 of our older communities and kept the 7 newest ones. So when we had Florence, we actually were able to evacuate our memory care residents to other memory care communities, and they were able to stay there and openings at those communities. Right now, where our memory cares across the company are so full, our plan is that the memory care residents would come with us to the hotel, the Village Inn, and we would actually have a team member who would stay and just sit in the room with them, and then provide activities during the day. But it would basically be 1 team member to every 2 memory care residents. So, but again, each company has their own plans in place. That is a wonderful question to ask, especially if you're looking around here. Can you tell me what did your company do during Florence when you had to evacuate, and hear how they handled it? In all honesty, when we came back, we had residents that were saying, can we do that again? that was great. That was a vacation for us. You know, they had a blast. For them, it was a lot of fun. For those of us that were working, it wasn't so much fun. But the residents were really, really happy to get out and go to a hotel and just try something new and different. But you do want how companies handle an evacuation like that is going to be kind of indicative of overall how they're going to treat your residents and your loved ones.
And then, what do you do if you have a resident who has no local family members, and no real extended family to help make decisions and to help watch out after them?
Mm-hmm.
What is in place to make sure that person is taken care of?
So that is, in that case, that is one where you really want to be very choosy as to the community that you put a person like that in. We have some residents that are like that, and you want to make sure, I would love to say that every community across the country treats residents the way we treat them. Unfortunately, we all know that that's not the case. And so that's where a person would want to make sure that they do really good homework on where they're looking to move prior to going into that community. You'd want to talk with the residents and all of the residents and find out how well they're taken care of. Like I mentioned, we have at Carteret Landing, we've got an incredible group of people that work there, in my opinion. And we have our management team. The person who has been at our community from the manager standpoint for the shortest period of time is 4 years. Lynn, our family advisor, she just hit 9 years. In 2 weeks, I'll hit my 9-year mark. So finding a company that really cares about that person is extremely important. Misty, RRN, I can't tell you how much of an advocate she is when our residents go to the hospital, because it's bound, we can't stop somebody from falling. Unfortunately, even moving into a community like ours, people are still going to fall. And so we have residents on a regular basis that are in the hospital or end up in rehab. And Misty is a regular advocate for them. She looks at the hospital reports and tells the families what she's noticing and what she would suggest that they ask the hospital. So it's really about finding a community where the team members are going to be advocates for that person. The other thing is you can always utilize the ombudsman program. So if you don't have full faith in the community itself, you can always reach out to the ombudsman's program and just ask them if they're willing to stop by and visit that person and just see how they're doing. And they're more than what that's what they're volunteers. They love to do that. And so that's another way that you can get that additional help for a family member that, you know, if the rest of the family is so far away or they don't have other family. What other questions can I answer?
Well,
Well, thank you. That was a lot longer than I anticipated. So I'm glad. Hopefully, it was interesting.
Yes, it was. Good
And in all honesty, if you have any questions that you think of, swing by our community. Come and visit. See Lynn. See myself. Just see what an assisted living is like. I know a lot of people still have the old nursing home. That's what you think that it's going to be, but it really has changed. And so we were at the one of my wellness directors, one of my managers was at the hospital, and she was having a little bit of an emergency herself. And when she said, "Oh, I work at Carteret Landing," which we're always a little bit hesitant to say because we do utilize EMS's services quite a bit. But the person said, "Oh, that's the one that doesn't smell. We like that one." So come and see what assisted living is like, because really we just did a competitive analysis and we visited all of the ones that are around us. We do have some good providers in this area, and our company's philosophy has always been a rising tide floats all boats. We want everyone to succeed and to provide great care, because the number one issue for us that prevents people from moving in is the stigma of what an assisted living is like. What does it mean when I move into an assisted living? So if you have questions, please feel free to stop by. Tune in to Lockwood. Go on his radio station's website. You'll find the podcasts that we've done, because Lynn and I talk a lot about hospice, about rehab, about different types of therapy, assisted living. A lot of the things that we touched on here, we go further in depth, and you can find a lot of that on the Talk Station's website. So, and then if you think of other questions, like I said, come by, or I'll come back and talk some more.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, and, speaking personally, Mike and I both have had loved ones at Carteret Landing. My wife is there now in memory care. She's been there in December, it'll be 2 years, and is home now for her. She's very comfortable there. We're very happy with the care as well. It was a rough decision, but it was one that necessarily had to be made. So anyway, Ryan, thank you for being here.
Thank you very
Enjoyed
much.
it very much. Absolutely. Thank you all. Eat some cookies, will you?
Yes, eat some cookies. Ian did such a good job preparing it all. so.